4 years, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have remained among the most closely watched figures in the world. Every public appearance, interview, and announcement has generated headlines across Britain, the United States, and beyond. Their departure from royal duties, high-profile media projects, and ongoing relationship with the royal family have fueled countless debates, making almost every aspect of their lives a subject of intense public discussion. One topic that has continued to attract attention is the story surrounding their daughter, Princess Lilibet Diana. While many people see it as a deeply personal family matter, others, including royal commentators and biographers, have argued that several aspects of the story deserve closer examination. Among the most prominent voices are author Tom Bower and royal commentator Lady Colin Campbell, often known as Lady C. Both have spent years discussing the Sussexes' public narrative, although their opinions remain controversial and are frequently challenged by Harry and Meghan supporters. Before exploring those arguments, it is important to understand the difference between verified facts and commentary. Many of the observations made by Bower and Lady C represent their interpretations based on publicly available information, interviews, and reporting. They are not official findings, and many of the issues they raise remain disputed. Even so, their work has influenced the broader conversation surrounding the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. What makes this story particularly fascinating is not simply the criticism itself, but how two very different narratives have developed over the past several years. On one side stands Harry and Meghan's account of their experiences inside the monarchy. On the other are commentators who believe important context has been overlooked or omitted. Between those perspectives lies a complicated story that continues to divide public opinion. Few events illustrate that divide more clearly than the announcement of Lilibet Diana's birth in June 2021. For most families, the arrival of a child is a private celebration. For the Sussexes, however, nearly every detail became international news. The baby's name immediately attracted extraordinary attention, not because of its popularity, but because of its deep connection to Queen Elizabeth II. Lilibet was not an ordinary royal name. It was the affectionate childhood nickname used by the late Queen's closest relatives, one that had remained deeply personal throughout her life. For decades, very few people outside her immediate family used it publicly. When Harry and Meghan announced that they had named their daughter Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor, reactions were immediate. Many people viewed the decision as a heartfelt tribute to both Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Diana. Others questioned whether such a private family nickname should have been used at all. The discussion became significantly more complicated after conflicting reports emerged regarding whether Queen Elizabeth had been consulted before the name was announced. Several media outlets reported that palace sources disputed claims that the Queen had given advance approval. Representatives for Harry and Meghan strongly rejected those reports, maintaining that Prince Harry had spoken with his grandmother before the announcement and that she had been informed of the couple's decision. Because neither side released a detailed public record of those private conversations, the disagreement has never been fully resolved in the public domain. As a result, the story has remained a recurring topic whenever discussions about the Sussexes resurface. It is this disagreement that attracted the attention of Tom Bower. Rather than focusing only on emotional reactions, Bower has argued that contradictions between different public accounts deserve careful examination. Throughout his career, he has built a reputation for producing investigative biographies that rely on interviews, published records, and extensive research. His supporters believe this approach strengthens his conclusions, while critics argue that some of his interpretations are selective or overly critical. Lady Colin Campbell approaches similar topics from a different perspective. Through books, television appearances, and online commentary, she frequently discusses the internal dynamics of the royal family and often offers opinions that challenge mainstream narratives. Like Bower, her observations generate significant debate, with audiences divided over how much weight should be given to her conclusions. Despite differences in style, both commentators have repeatedly returned to one central theme. They argue that the public story surrounding Harry and Meghan is more complex than many headlines suggest. Whether one agrees with that assessment or not, there is little doubt that their commentary has influenced discussions among royal watchers. Another reason the Lilibet story continues to receive attention is its timing. Only months earlier, Harry and Meghan had participated in their widely watched interview with Oprah Winfrey. During that conversation, they described feeling unsupported within the institution, spoke about mental health struggles, and discussed concerns surrounding royal life. The interview became one of the defining media moments of 2021, prompting widespread debate around the world. Against that backdrop, Naming their daughter after one of Queen Elizabeth's most personal family nicknames created a striking contrast in the eyes of many observers. Supporters viewed the choice as evidence that family affection could exist despite institutional disagreements. Critics interpreted it differently, arguing that it appeared inconsistent with the couple's broader criticism of the monarchy. Neither interpretation has ever been universally accepted, which helps explain why the discussion continues years later. As Bauer has suggested in interviews, controversies often become larger not because every question has an immediate answer, but because competing narratives continue to exist without clear resolution. That pattern has appeared repeatedly throughout the Sussexes' public life. Questions surrounding interviews, memoirs, documentaries, media partnerships, and royal traditions have often produced sharply different interpretations depending on which sources people trust. For some audiences, Harry and Meghan represent individuals who challenged an outdated institution. For others, they have become examples of how modern celebrity, media strategy, and public relations can shape public perception. The debate surrounding Lilibet's name fits squarely into that broader conversation. It is also worth remembering that much of the public discussion has relied on anonymous palace sources, unnamed insiders, media reporting, and commentary rather than official documentation. That reality makes definitive conclusions difficult. Nevertheless, every new development, from birthday photographs to family appearances, has reignited interest in questions many assumed would eventually fade away. As years passed, another significant royal event changed the context once again. Following the death of Queen Elizabeth II in September 2022, King Charles III ascended the throne. Under long-standing royal conventions, Archie and Lilibet became grandchildren of the reigning monarch, making them entitled to use the titles of Prince and Princess. The announcement sparked another round of public debate. Some commentators argued that accepting royal titles appeared inconsistent with earlier criticism of the institution. Others responded that the titles reflected constitutional tradition rather than personal preference and that the children should not be drawn into adult disagreements. Once again, public opinion remained divided. For Tom Bauer and Lady Colin Campbell, these developments reinforced their broader argument that the Sussex story cannot be understood through a single narrative alone. They believe the public should compare statements, timelines, and official events before reaching conclusions. Whether audiences ultimately agree with those conclusions is another matter entirely. What remains beyond dispute is that the story surrounding Harry, Meghan, and their children continues to evolve. Each new interview, public appearance, or royal milestone adds another chapter to a debate that has now lasted for years. And as more books, documentaries, and commentaries continue to emerge, one question remains at the center of it all. Is the continuing controversy driven primarily by unanswered questions, by conflicting interpretations, or simply by the extraordinary level of public interest surrounding one of the world's most famous families? As the years passed, the discussion surrounding Harry and Meghan expanded far beyond a single decision or public statement. What had begun as debates over royal duties and media coverage gradually evolved into broader questions about trust, credibility, and the relationship between public figures and the audiences who follow them. This is where the work of commentators such as Tom Bauer and Lady Colin Campbell continued to attract attention. Both argued that understanding the Sussex story required looking beyond individual headlines and examining how different events connected over time. Rather than focusing on one interview or one controversy, they encouraged audiences to compare timelines, public statements, and official developments before drawing conclusions. Their approach appealed to many royal watchers who believed the story had become too polarized. In today's media environment, people often encounter dramatically different versions of the same event depending on which publications, broadcasters, or commentators they follow. The Sussexes' story has become one of the clearest examples of this phenomenon. For supporters, Harry and Meghan have consistently spoken about the pressures they experienced within the royal family and the British press. They argue that stepping away from royal duties allowed them to protect their mental health and build a different future for their children. Critics, however, have questioned whether some aspects of the couple's public narrative have remained entirely consistent over time. It is within that space that authors like Bauer and Lady C have focused much of their attention. One recurring topic has been the balance between privacy and publicity. Since relocating to California, Harry and Meghan have repeatedly emphasized their desire to protect their children's privacy. At the same time, carefully selected photographs and family updates have occasionally been shared during birthdays, charitable initiatives, or documentary projects. Some observers view this as a reasonable attempt to maintain boundaries while acknowledging public interest. Others believe the selective release of information naturally invites further questions. Neither perspective has ended the debate, and both continue to shape public discussion whenever new images or announcements appear. Another issue that has received considerable attention is the Sussexes' commercial partnerships. Following their departure from royal duties, Harry and Meghan signed major agreements with media companies, including Netflix and Spotify. These partnerships reflected a new phase in their public lives, one in which they sought to build independent careers through documentaries, podcasts, and other creative projects. The results, however, have been mixed. Some productions attracted substantial audiences and global attention, while others received more divided reviews. When Spotify announced the end of its partnership with Archwell Audio in 2023, industry analysts offered a variety of explanations, ranging from changing business priorities to differing expectations regarding content production. Commentators interpreted the development in different ways. Some viewed it as an ordinary business decision within a highly competitive entertainment industry. Others argued that it reflected broader challenges facing the Sussex brand as public opinion became increasingly divided. Tom Bower has suggested that credibility ultimately becomes one of the most valuable assets for any public figure. Whether discussing politicians, business leaders, celebrities, or members of royal families, he argues that audiences gradually evaluate not only what is being said, but also whether different statements remain consistent over time. That argument has become central to much of the ongoing discussion surrounding Harry and Meghan. Lady Colin Campbell has frequently expressed a similar view, although in her own style. She often suggests that royal controversies rarely disappear completely because each new event encourages people to revisit earlier questions. In her opinion, stories left unresolved tend to resurface whenever another significant development occurs. This pattern has certainly characterized the Sussexes' public life. From the Oprah interview to the publication of Prince Harry's memoir Spare, from documentary series to public appearances, each milestone has prompted renewed examination of previous statements and decisions. Yet there is another perspective that deserves equal consideration. Supporters of Harry and Meghan argue that no public figure should be expected to answer every rumor, every commentary, or every interpretation presented by critics. They point out that speculation can easily grow regardless of whether someone responds publicly. History offers many examples in which public silence has been interpreted in multiple, and often contradictory, ways. Some people believe silence suggests confidence. Others interpret it as strategic restraint. Still others see it as an attempt to avoid prolonging a controversy. Without direct evidence, assigning a single meaning to that silence becomes difficult. The same principle applies to Buckingham Palace. Throughout modern royal history, the palace has frequently relied on the informal philosophy of never complain, never explain. Although that approach has not always been followed perfectly, it has influenced royal communications for decades. As a result, the absence of an official response to a particular claim should not automatically be interpreted as confirmation or rejection of that claim. Nevertheless, public curiosity often fills the space left by official silence. That curiosity has fueled countless books, documentaries, podcasts, television specials, and online discussions examining every aspect of the relationship between Harry, Meghan, and the royal family. In many respects, the continuing fascination reflects something much larger than one family. It highlights the growing intersection of monarchy, celebrity culture, journalism, social media, and public relations in the 21st century. Royal stories that once unfolded primarily through newspapers now spread instantly across digital platforms, where millions of people debate events in real time. Commentators, authors, journalists, and content creators all contribute to an ongoing conversation that rarely reaches a definitive conclusion. The story of Lilibet's name demonstrates exactly how this process works. A deeply personal family decision became an international discussion because it intersected with broader questions about tradition, symbolism, privacy, and public perception. For some people, it represented a touching tribute to Queen Elizabeth II. For others, it symbolized unresolved tensions between the Sussexes and the institution they had left behind. Neither interpretation has completely displaced the other. Perhaps that explains why the conversation continues years after the original announcement. It is not simply about a name. It is about how different audiences interpret the same sequence of events through different experiences, values, and expectations. Tom Bower believes careful examination of evidence remains essential whenever powerful public narratives emerge. Lady Colin Campbell believes important context is often overlooked during highly emotional public debates. Harry and Meghan, meanwhile, have consistently maintained that many criticisms directed toward them rely on misunderstandings, selective reporting, or unfair assumptions. These perspectives do not easily fit together. Instead, they illustrate why the Sussex story has remained one of the defining royal debates of the modern era. Whether future books, interviews, or official documents will resolve every remaining question is impossible to predict. Some mysteries surrounding public life may never receive universally accepted answers. What is certain, however, is that interest in the royal family continues to endure across generations. Every announcement, appearance, and milestone becomes part of a much larger historical narrative that extends far beyond today's headlines. For viewers, the most valuable approach may be to examine multiple sources, distinguish verified facts from opinion, and remain open to the possibility that complex stories rarely have simple explanations. As more information emerges over time, perspectives may continue to evolve. Until then, the discussion surrounding Harry, Meghan, Lilibet, and the royal family is likely to remain one of the most closely followed conversations in modern royal history. One that reflects not only the lives of those involved, but also the powerful role media, public opinion, and storytelling play in shaping how history is remembered. Ultimately, the question is not whether everyone will agree. They almost certainly will not. The more meaningful question is how audiences evaluate competing claims, separate evidence from interpretation, and decide which accounts they find most persuasive. That process, perhaps more than any single allegation or headline, is what keeps this remarkable royal story alive.